Hello, and again, welcome back to Basement Entertainment. As a kinda late New Year's resolution, I've decided to resurrect this channel, and I will do that by making a bunch of rant videos, or maybe kinda podcast style videos, because editing videos is difficult, but ranting into a microphone is relatively easy. The very first subject that I want to tackle on this fine evening is a very essential question concerning inceldom. Perhaps it's a subject that's actually more interesting to the opponents, or perhaps people who are interested in inceldom but not necessarily identifying with the label. And that is what, or rather who, is an incel. For people who self-identify as incels, it's usually pretty straightforward. It's in the name, after all. Incel is just short for involuntary celibate. Someone who is celibate involuntarily, so that means he doesn't have a girlfriend despite wanting one. And I'm using he because it's an issue that affects predominantly guys. Many people would argue that only guys. Some people would say it's not. There are some self-identified femcels, but I will stick to the consensus, let's say. And I would make the definition even easier. Incel is just an ugly guy. Because after all, if you're an ugly guy, you have two options. At least according to Black Pill, which says that you're not very likely to get a girlfriend. You can either be an incel or a so-called volcel, aka a voluntarily celibate. That means you don't have a girlfriend, but you're fine with it. I would say that realistically, it doesn't really matter whether you want to have a girlfriend or not. You're an incel regardless. Why do I think that? It's pretty easy. Not wanting a girlfriend is a matter of self-identification. And from an outsider perspective, no one can judge, no one can tell if you're being sincere or not. Perhaps many would say it's just a coping mechanism. You actually want a girlfriend, but you're coping, saying that no, I don't want one. Basically sour grapes. And I would say even if you're actually like asexual and don't want one, that doesn't matter anyway, because from the outsider perspective, you're a guy, most guys want a girlfriend, and you will still experience the incel social experience, no matter what. If you go job hunting, if you go socializing, you will just be an ugly guy without a girlfriend, and people will assume that you wanted one. So you're an incel. No one can tell that you actually don't want one. But okay, putting that aside, let's see what others are, let's say opponents, people who are critical of inceldom would say. They say words change meanings, and inceldom actually nowadays means someone who subscribes to an ideology, a hateful ideology at it, and hence it's fine to discriminate against self-identifying incels or people who get the incel label despite not identifying with it. And I would say that's already an argument against this view. So to start out, I would agree that words do change meaning, and it is possible to ascribe such a meaning to the word incel. You can define it as someone subscribing to this or that ideology, but it's a very similar case to feminism, actually. The opponents of feminism would say that feminism is about hating men, basically. That it's a kind of ideology of female supremacy. That the goal of feminism is putting men down. But no actual feminist, at least excluding maybe some very radical exceptions, would describe feminism this way. So why wouldn't inceldom be an ideology? It's pretty simple, because people don't actually use incel this way. When you look at the usage of the word online, it basically fits my definition. It's an ugly guy. Sometimes it's not necessarily an ugly guy, sometimes it's just a general insult. A very simple case would be looking at the political discourse and the discourse concerning celebrities such as Andrew Tate or Donald Trump. Who else? Oh, Vladimir Putin. When Putin declared war on Ukraine, where he didn't outright declare it, he just started a war, but said it was like a special operation or something. It doesn't matter, basically started a war. The discourse around him was very focused on his looks. When you looked at Twitter, you might have gotten the impression that his real crime wasn't killing many people as the result of the war he started, but rather his looks. Many people made fun of him because he's bald, because he is short, a so-called manlet, and in general he's pretty old. He got a bunch of plastic surgeries or Botox injections to look relatively young, but it kind of looks grotesque. It doesn't really work. And people were attacking his masculinity this way. They were saying that he started the war on Ukraine to compensate for his bad looks. A very common phrase with short men. And short men are considered ugly by default, is the Napoleon complex. That's the idea that short men compensate with aggression, their short stature. And even Angela Merkel, that's funny because Angela Merkel isn't a traditionally feminine woman, but even she outright attacked his masculinity, saying his war is a way to compensate for his lack of masculinity. That basically means his looks in this case. A similar thing has happened right at the end of 2022 with the whole Greta Thunberg versus Andrew Tate ordeal. It's a pretty well-known thing, but if you're listening in the future, you don't remember it or whatever, you didn't care for Twitter drama. Basically, Tate made an inflammatory post about his wealth, his cars, and he tagged Greta Thunberg saying, "Wow, look how many cars I have, they create so much pollution, you're mad." And he finished his post saying, "Oh, do you want, send me your email address and I will give you the data on how much pollution I cause," and so on. It was I'm not a fan of Andrew Tate. Ironically, I saw some people claiming Andrew Tate is like an incel king, like a leader of our so-called cause, but actually, in my experience at least, not many self-described incels actually like Andrew Tate. But regardless, she responded by saying that by providing a fake email address where she implied that he has a short penis, and implied that way that he is flexing, him flexing his wealth is a way to compensate for this shortcoming. That also ties with the general discourse concerning masculinity, and that's kind of ironic because both Greta Thunberg and Angela Merkel are the kind of people whom you wouldn't suspect to focus on like traditional gender roles. But anyway, it was a case where they attacked his masculinity, and as I said previously, Tate was declared an incel king or a leader, and that's kind of ridiculous. There is nothing to really back up that statement. Obviously, Andrew Tate is a person who engages in a lot of sexual activity. Actually, that's how he allegedly got his wealth, through a webcam business where he employed his girlfriends. So that's like an antithesis of inceldom. But people called him incel anyway. So why is that? That's an obvious contradiction to a popular claim that inceldom is ideology. Tate was declared an incel despite not sharing the usual incel worldview. The worldview that people ascribe to inceldom is the so-called black pill, which is not necessary. It's not a necessary condition to be considered incel. But even if we take that for granted, Andrew Tate nor obviously Vladimir Putin, they don't subscribe to black pill. If anything, Tate is a huge adherent of the red pill, which many incels would call coping. It entails that actually your sexual success isn't determined by your biology, by your looks. It's all about game and wealth and so on. So why would you call those people incels? Putin also was called incel, similarly Donald Trump, and many random ugly people were called incels, sometimes on the IT incel tier subreddit. You will find many comments where they will claim that some people look like school shooters, which is ridiculous. School shooters not only often aren't incels, actually the original guys, Columbine shooters, at least one of them was actually pretty sociable guy, apparently. But also there is no clear correlation between looks and crime, as we can see in the Andrew Tate case. He's a successful guy in terms of sexuality. But despite that, he's pretty evil. So why were they called incels? Only because of looks. That's what it boils down to. This rant was pretty incoherent, but yeah. The short version is, if incel is ideology, then it's only something you can self-declare as. No one else can call you an incel if you don't agree with some special ideology, and the widespread usage online, in real life, whatever, is that people call just regular ugly men incels. Sometimes they're ideological opponents, but there is no clear coherent ideology that all so-called incels subscribe to. So, as I said in the beginning, incel is just an ugly guy. It doesn't, according to the definition, it's an ugly guy who wants to have a girlfriend but can't. But I would argue that so-called fosils also are incels in the end, because no one can tell if you're genuine about your asexuality. and asexuality is obviously not very widespread, so the default is wanting a partner of this or that kind. What I would say against those who say otherwise, well, if you want to actually force this definition, don't call random people incels, and even people who call themselves incels don't all hold the same views. There are many red-pilled incels, there are many black-pilled incels, and there are even blue-pilled incels. So it doesn't make sense to ascribe any ideology to inceldom. Even when you go to incels.is, a very popular incel forum that is pretty homogeneous, you will get banned for some more blue-pilled views. Even there you will see much discussion who cannot be an incel, what black pill and entails in detail. There are some general black-pilled views that are common, but there are obviously debatable details. So incels aren't a monolith. It doesn't make sense to discriminate against them and try to pretend you're fighting for some noble cause, because all incels subscribe to some evil ideology, because that's just plainly not true. And if you actually want to fight against misogyny, just say it outright. Don't call people incels, which is just an ugly guy. Just call them misogynists. If someone's real crime is being a war criminal or a misogynist or a racist, to just call them that, not use words like incels. It's exactly the same as when people use virgin, loser, or short dick as an insult. It makes it seem like their real crime was their looks or social status after all. If you actually don't think that, then don't use these words. Use your language responsibly. That's it. Thanks.